customers maybe not so much in customers maybe not so much in name, right?
Mhm.
But in desire for this type of approach to cybersecurity are really waking up, right?
Yeah.
Like customers are tired of the FUD. They're tired of being told that the next panacea is to buy this service only to have someone turn around and tell them you got to buy more because there's more. And so
Yes. Yes.
they're really sick and tired of of kind of having like the wizard behind the curtain that's not letting them know what and why we're
Mhm.
doing things. And so they have this desire for a different method, a consultative strategic method that makes sense to their business for the MSPs to bring to them. And I think that's why you're seeing the market demand for this service wake up.
Yeah, yeah, I think too, when you have something like CMMC finally finalized within the industry, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
wannabe implementers and certifiers out there, this is going to naturally come next. But then you look at the upstream, hey, if you're that 10, 15, or even $5, $10 million MSP, and you're working with those larger defense contractors,
Mm-hmm.
where are they going to look first? They're going to look to you first. So I think being prepared is huge in this. Now, I see it all the time, and I kind of want to stage this conversation for the different levels of MSPs. For instance, starting with the million to 3.5 million, those MSPs they're more than emerging, but they're still looking to find their footing. Maybe they have 10, 15, 25 clients somewhere in there. They're managing a few hundred to 1,000 endpoints, but they're looking to grow. They're looking to say, hey, I have a specialized knowledge in security. I know my way through this or that, whether it's HIPAA, whether it's NIST, whether it's CMMC, and I want to implement this. I want to have this source of revenue because I can't increase per seat pricing. Maybe I'm located in a lower area. The most I can get is 175, 200 at the
Right.
most. I need to build a nice source of MRR and ARR that really builds stickiness with our clients, meaning I don't want to lose those 20 to 25 clients because they're so dependent right now on those. What is that first step that they take when they want to
Yeah.
implement something like vCISO?
Yeah. There's like a whole lot in that question.
I know.
I'm,
So
I'm going to try and walk through that. Right. So,
yeah.
uh, the first thing that you mentioned is, well, actually the first thing that kind of stuck in my ear when you said it is like, I can only get 175 per seat in my region. Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing that vCISO allows you to do is break out of a regional kind
Yeah.
of barrier. Right.
Smart.
With you now, the other thing you said, we know NIST, we know CMMC, we know this. The other thing is you need to specialize for this. Like most MSPs, I would say, I think there's a lot of people in the vendor space, I mean, myself included, that say, hey, you need to get better about your ICP, your ideal
Yeah.
client profile, creating psychographics and detailed messaging for a specific type of target market and even niche within that market, right? So MSPs are kind of talked at until they're blue in the face about this, right? So,
Mm,
and MSPs are like, well, hey, I've done all right, just taking whatever business comes my way with IT services. But
yeah.
that's the thing, is that this is a completely different animal, right? This is first and foremost a trust-based service. You're talking
Yes.
about strategic planning and risk planning for their business to help it succeed, not just over the next 6 months of buying some PCs and servers, but
Right.
over the next 5, 10 years to create resilience and help them grow. And so you don't do that by just saying, hey, you're going to get hacked. Right. So,
Yeah.
so to kind of bring that back is you need to get to specific on a target market that allows you to break out of a regional market, because you can go nationwide with these services, right? And go after accounts that you could use it as an entry point for MSP and other services. So you mentioned growing ARR, growing MRR. Okay. We have to position this as like the lead off. I think the major mistake that I see is MSPs kind of say like, oh, we have our IT services, we have our security services. And by the way, if you need it, there's compliance over here.
Yes.
So immediately customer that doesn't have compliance, a manufacturer, which you mentioned, says, oh, I'm not
Yep.
CMMC, don't need that. Right. So
Yes.
how do
Yep.
I, like, I'm not going to pay, $5,000 a month extra on top of my 175, like you mentioned. I don't need this. Well, that's backwards. So if we're
Yep.
using our messaging and our outreach, and we're going through and saying, okay, we understand your specific industry. We understand manufacturing of widgets for Acme Company, right? And these are the things you're
Mhm.
worried about. And this is how we take a risk-based approach. This is the lead off. right? So this becomes an entry point into client accounts that structures the whole conversation from a strategic perspective at the start of the relationship, and then everything waterfalls down, right? So yeah, IT services are needed. Yeah, cybersecurity services are needed, but the linchpin is the strategic relationship that vCISO brings to the table.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you find this in a lot of those early MSPs. They look at providing strategic value. They want to be seen as a guide. And I always say there's a differentiating in this space of any outsourced services, whether it's accounting from Stride, MSP. It's,
Yeah.
are you a service provider or are you a solutions partner? And I know MSP, service partner or provider, but if you really want to mature up the curve, and that does come with that hyper specificity of saying, hey, I know manufacturing of this industry and this type and this specific widget better than anybody else. Here's why you need to work with me. Because you're not just getting security, you're getting the full encompassing solution of technology, security, systems, and a plan moving forward as you grow and scale or the needs change. You don't even have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about, hey, we have this compliance audit. Hey, we have this. We're seeing a downturn. We need to have a whole new system overhaul because we have brand new CNC and CNC machining in our office. Cool. We understand that. I think when you look at it, those MSPs that are smaller, they typically will say, what? I'm strategic in my quarterly business review, which, you know, if you talk to Wes Spencer and that, those become quarterly sales reviews where you're looking to upsell and increase. It really shouldn't be about selling. It should be about saying, here's what's happened, here's where we are, and here's what we can do in terms of path forward based on the challenges that you, client, have brought to me. And I think that's a big sticking point, is being firm in your convictions. If you're being hired as an expert, be the expert. Don't let them say, well, I hear what you're saying, Jesse, but actually this is what I want to do. And you could say, sure, but why do you want to do that? Because this is the path it's going to go down. But if you don't spend the time to do the research to answer those questions, you're going to be more likely to bend and break towards what your clients are saying instead of staying firm in your conviction, saying, here's why you hired me in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so, and that's interesting. And I agree completely. So it's interesting that how do we get there, right? Like how, like you mentioned, like, how do I get started? That's the question. Well, number one is you have to go through and do this go-to-market exercise, right? Like when we have people join the Power Grid, that's one of the first things we have them do. Customer segmentation. And I'm not talking about like revenue and size. I'm talking about like 30 different data points that we want you to go through and list out the customers and then say, okay, based on all that, now who's our best customer? Are there intersections? Now, it doesn't have to be the same industry all the time. I think, you know, sometimes it, and a lot of times it does line up that way, but are there specific types of relationships and types of triggers that are causing these to be better relationships for us and to have them be more open to cybersecurity? Okay, so that is a good signal to say those are the ones we want to talk to first in our current client base, but also, can we mine out data to say these are the types of things that they're thinking and saying that go into our messaging to attract more clients like that into our orbit, right? And those are the ones that are going to be predisposed for vCISO and strategic relationships, right? So I think that's a pragmatic way to get started.
Absolutely. You know, in your opinion, and in your earlier experience, where is the best entry? And best, I know, is very subjective, but where's the ideal entry point for an MSP, revenue size, maturity wise, maybe OML, where they should say, hey, it's time to implement vCISO because we're leaving $1 million, $1.5 million on the table right now. Let's say they got 60, 70 clients, but like, where do you see that ideal of saying, hey, our case study as a Power Grid and PowerPSA, the MSPs who meet these parameters, they do really well implementing vCISO to grow revenue?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I will just kind of front end that by saying that it's not so much size, but more of like appetite and strategic initiative, right? So we have a couple different types of organizations in the Power Grid. So the first one is interesting. I see a lot of ex-MSP owners who sold and are now building vCISO only practices. So we see smaller, like that's what I'm saying. They're smaller, right? 1 to 5 people, but they're focused on doing vCISO and they have an MSP partner or something like that. Okay. Or it's a sister company or something like that. I see MSPs who spin off sister companies and they take somebody and, you know, this is what we're talking about getting started. They make somebody accountable, right? and they enable them and maybe give them a small stake in the program to help build it, right? So there's that type. But then I think like the ones that I see, like the primary body is the ones in like the 15 to 30 personnel range, which is like that, 3 million to maybe 7 or 8 million size. Now we do have larger ones too. But that's where I see a lot of MSPs getting started, right? So not to say you can't be outside that, but the other, what I talked about, the strategic initiative is really important. And I tell people this before I'll even sign them up. Like I say, this isn't like come sign up for the power grid and you're going to have a vCISO program. I'm saying you have to be willing to jump in and dedicate resources to this. So do you have someone, whether it's the founder or, a security lead, this is what I want to see. Do you have somebody that's going to be able to dedicate a half a day a week to get this thing started off the ground? Like if you can't dedicate 4 hours a week to get in and start doing some of these things, right? And come to the office hours and learn and implement the systems in your business, it's just going to be another one of those things where it's on your website. We offer vCISO services over here if you need it. It's never a strategic conversation because it's not embedded into the DNA of your organization. So what does that look like? It has to be embedded, and there's different sizes of organizations that need it, right?
Absolutely. We did an exercise about a year ago where we talked about the accounting and bookkeeping and tax and all the core functions, but we said if we don't prioritize advisory, meaning guiding our clients towards where they've outlined their desired outcome is, meaning, hey, I want to sell in 3 years. No, I want to build my business to 5 million. No, I want to be able to budget and forecast so I can have this lifestyle. And being able to answer those questions directly in the fabric of our offering, it allows us to win more at that rate, but then also have better client engagements. Back when I was an MSP, it was the same thing. We did compliance. We worked with a lot of government organizations where, you know anything about government and nonprofits, they don't have a lot of extra time, a lot of extra resources, or extra capacity. So they're looking at you to add a little bit more layering, but it's why we won contracts year over year over year and 3-year deals, and we got pulled in elsewhere. And I imagine it's a lot the same for MSPs. Not only do you get to offer, you did make a good point. You're not stuck with that regionality. You're not stuck. Hey, I'm in Northeast Ohio. I'm in Minnesota. Hey, no, I'm in Kentucky or Montgomery, Alabama, and I really can't price more. Now you can go nationwide with your offering. Adds a little more complexity to the tax side, not too much. Maybe you have to file returns in states you're doing business. Nothing crazy, so don't be afraid of that. I do hear that often, but really, I'm sure you see it all the time. That maturity of the clients you're working with. You're
Oh,
not
it's so
just
much
with the
better.
small businesses. You're able to work with 30, 40, 50, the enterprise level, millions and millions of dollar companies. And I'm sure you see that pretty frequently.
Yeah, that is a great point. Is like just the acumen of the clientele you're working with is just better. I mean, let's be frank, because these services are now. I will say, when I was the CISO of an MSP and we built these programs, we were selling vCISO services like a stripped down model to like 12-person nonprofits, right? So if you position properly and you understand your audience, you can find the right package for anybody. And then packaging is a big deal as part of this. So that's another reason why you need to specialize. But the point is that typically you're going to see like 100 to 300 size companies who really want to consume this. And those are the ones who are really set up well for co-manage. They have understand governance, right? And so it's just a better relationship all the way. And if you're able to be strategic with them, they understand working remote. So if you're able to be strategic with them and you can, plant a vCISO somewhere nationwide and then have them handle all your clients, it becomes a very lucrative model. And one thing we didn't talk about is the fact of looking at vCISO in a silo is another problem. Like you mentioned, and I'm with you, it's in my tagline, like, create a vCISO program that's over 1 million ARR, but that's just the start, right? This is like a revenue multiplier, because as I mentioned, this is getting you in to organizations. And then in those companies I just mentioned, you're consistently and continually rinse and repeating monthly or even weekly sometimes, uncovering new projects, uncovering new services, uncovering new pain points. Like it's a revenue multiplier for the rest of the MSP. And if you're not looking at it that way and you're just, oh, by the way, we offer vCISO, I mean, it's a non-starter for you at that point. You might as well not do it.
Yeah, I look at it the difference. This is going to sound hilarious, but it's like a fast food example. If you think of it as a standalone and an offshoot, it's like offering an ice cream cone with your burgers and fries. But if you offer it as a part of the core agreement, now it's like having a burger place that sells chicken sandwiches. You're getting a higher margin, something that's embedded in a meal. You're going to cater to more people who are looking for something specific. Plus,
Yeah.
what I've seen personally is those MSPs that see their clients grow. You know, you have that client that grows where, hey, we're going to bring an IT department internally. We just need to
Yeah.
match the needs. Having
Yeah.
vCISO keeps you a part of that picture. And it
Yeah.
also can make you a lot more efficient because let's say they're putting a new IT department together. Who do you think they're going to ask first to help design and put that
Yeah.
together? Probably the MSP and security specialist
Yeah.
they're working with. And then they also say, hey, can you have somebody? We see this with the fractional CFO side. We have people internally. We have our managers. We have a really good IT. We have a service administrator. What we're looking for is somebody who could sit on the leadership table and own that strategy hat. And I think that's a core offering where it's almost that fractional VC. So where it's like, hey,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll sit on your leadership meetings. I'll help you go
Yeah.
through design. When you're looking to do a new implementation of systems and projects, maybe it's your operating system, your PSA, et cetera. We can make sure you're seeing it from that security, technology, and compliance lens. So you're not seeing anything that's like, oh, wait, we are have to be compliant. We just moved to a non-compliant tool, something we didn't even think of. And I don't know, how often do you see that happening where it almost, hey, they get rid of us as an MSP, but they keep us because we have that vCISO component?
Yeah, I actually see it the other way around. So
Really?
yeah, we have a couple MSPs who came in to the power grid and they had not
Mhm.
one specifically I remember had not signed up. They were kind of kicking the tires for about a year.
Yeah.
And he finally signed up because he's like, hey, we just lost a client to another MSP because they had a separate compliance consultant who said you need to go with this MSP because they're security and compliance and risk focused. So he's like, well, I'm not going to let that happen again. So he joined, and then what happened 6 months down the road after implementing this and getting the messaging right and everything, he's getting brought into deals with people saying,
Wow.
I don't trust my MSP. I don't think they know what they're doing. Can you talk to it? Oh yeah, I'll be your VC. So, and by the way, we're an MSP, so we know how to work with MSPs. Well, what does that
Wow.
usually turn into? It usually turns into you offsetting the other MSP at the end of the day, right? So,
That's interesting because that could be a huge differentiator. You know, I talked about Robert Gillette a few weeks ago about sales differentiators for MSPs. That's a big one. I mean, if you could
mhm,
say, hey, yeah, you got 4 proposals from 4 MSPs in your area, but one has VC, so it has this guy who's always talking about security and compliance and maintaining
yeah,
a plan and building the right organizational chart. I want to work with him. I like that. I like what he's doing. And I think that's a really interesting component that you've seen that. And I'm sure that guy who kicked the tires, I bet one of the
yeah,
things he said was, I wish I did this sooner. Like I wish I
yeah.
implemented this sooner. I'm sure of it.
Oh yeah.
So
Um, so as part of that as well, if you think about it, like pragmatically, what does this mean? You talked about the four, competitive bids, right?
yeah,
So let's say you're talking to a 150-person trading firm in New York, right? They have SEC compliance, perfect MSP client. They're going to just trade. By the way, trading firms usually they don't care what it costs; they just want it to work. So it's like
yeah.
that's somebody who's like just takes your recommendations. Perfect client for you, right? Um, but if you go in there to the bid and one person's bid says, we'll help you with your cybersecurity program and make sure that your risks are addressed. Or if your bid says, our cybersecurity program and our vCISO program specifically helps you build a governance program that meets the requirements for the 10K reporting for SEC requirements, who do you think is going to win that bid? Right.
So yeah,
So,
every day.
yeah. So,
Now, when you talk about the sales of it, because this is a question I get. I have MSPs, and I'm sure this comes back to, hey, get your profile down, practice. But
yeah.
those who say, I'm really struggling to sell this service, they
Mhm.
don't seem to want to see the value or they don't want to pay that investment. What do you see as the core issue of that? What is the crux of that issue where they're saying, hey, this is why you're not successfully selling your vCISO programs?
Well, yeah, there's different parts of it, but I do want to look at their funnel and understand like how are they bringing clients in and how are they running the sales process with them, and then how does this line up? So, uh,
Yeah.
the power grid, our framework is we call it dress for success. So it's the 5 stages
Mhm.
of the customer journey: discovery, requisition, engagement, services, and stewardship. Okay, so most people talk about the buying journey and they get the first two right, like discovery and
Yeah.
requisition, marketing and sales, right? And then, but we need to have a continual client journey. So,
Mhm.
so I want to look at all that for if we're having problems selling, like what does that mean exactly? Like, are things breaking down where we have people coming in and we never get past the proposal stage? Or does it mean that we're not getting leads at all for the service? Like, where is it breaking down? So I probably want to understand where that's happening, but let's just say we're getting leads in and it's breaking down in the proposal stage. We're showing it to them and they say, hey, that looks good, but it's too expensive. We don't see the value. Okay. Well, I would challenge that. You're probably not messaging and qualifying properly enough in the sales process to bring the right types of leads down to that next stage in the funnel. So you probably are stuck in that, like, we help with cybersecurity and resilience, generic messaging, and people are coming in and being like, yeah, I'm not willing to pay that. But if you're speaking to, we help with these specific pain points that keep you up at night. And by the way, how we do that is through cybersecurity strategy. That's a whole different conversation. And you probably will actually generate less leads, but higher quality leads, which is exactly what we want. We want our qualification and lead gen process to actually help the wrong prospects self-select out of the process before we even ever have to talk to them. And that's almost as important as getting the right, or as getting leads into the funnel, right?
Yeah.
And how do we do?
I
do
think
that?
when people
We
think
do
of
that through messaging.
qualification, people think of qualification of their leads and they think, I want to qualify a lead. Part of qualifying is disqualifying. Part of
Right.
qualifying, including a discovery meeting, and saying, hey, I don't think we're the right fit to work with you,
Yeah.
Jesse. I
Yeah.
don't think you're what I need, what you need right in this moment. So let me refer you to the right person. I think that's one of the most powerful. And I'll leave this tip to anybody who does sales in there. I always say,
Yeah, man.
at the end of the call, I always say, okay, forget about everything that we've talked about relating to me today. What's another area of your business where you have a challenge that you're looking for somebody? Maybe I know someone.
Yeah.
And that is a huge differentiator because you're also seeing, oh, this guy's not just trying to sell me. He truly sees and he's a helper, which most MSPs are. I truly believe that most MSP owners and leaders, they really want to help. They're problem solvers. That's why they're
Yeah.
in this industry. So the more you can highlight that as a differentiator, and then early on in the discovery, one of the first things I'll say is say, hey, I want to learn two things today. I want to learn a little bit about what prompted you to reach out here today, to Stride, what you're looking for, what are some of the core issues, and I want to make a recommendation on one thing. Are we a potential partner fit? We could talk about that moving forward. If it doesn't seem like we're the best fit, let's try to find the best fit for you. Right there, it gets rid of, oh, this guy just wants to sell me on why they're so great. No, this guy wants to have a conversation and respect your time because you said, hey, I want to schedule a meeting with Casey Seaborn. I'm going to talk with him today. I want to honor that time. And I think that's where a lot of business owners, and it's a time issue. I mean, it's just there's a lot of things going on. You wear a lot of hats. If you don't have systems for your people to really own those areas of your business, if you have that operational immaturity, it's going to be hard to dedicate that time to research and practice and put the information and time into saying, how can I build the best experience? Because every single time you're talking with a potential prospect or client, you are on stage. You are
Yeah.
there performing. And if you only practice when you perform, you're not going to get better at a consistent rate. It's like saying, look at the basketball model in the United States. We play AAU 5-6 days a week. It's games, 1 day practice. In Europe, it's 6 days of practice, 1 day of games. And they are more fundamentally sound. They win. They have higher rates of winning over there. If you look at that, I think it's the same thing when you talk about sales and being a business owner, but that comes down to operational maturity. And I think the beauty of vCISO is it does increase the operational maturity of your MSP,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
one of the biggest issues that we experience and see for MSPs that are looking to sell is when the owner is the rainmaker. When everything lives and dies by that owner of the MSP, you are automatically hurting your valuation
Yeah.
because that can't be replicated. But if you can find a way to say, how do I offboard operations? How do I offboard managing techs and service desks? How do I offboard other functions of accounting, finance, marketing, so I can focus on what I'm good at and what the business truly needs? It's going to improve your maturity as a business and your valuation. And I'm sure you see it too. The MSPs
Yeah.
that put in vCISO, they're much more attractive to the potential buyers who are like, I want an MSP in this region. Oh, you don't just have managed on service compliance. Oh, you have this other offering. You have that advisory level of a high MRR, high ticket, high value, sticky kind of a consulting engagement. And I'm sure that adds to the valuations of the MSPs you work with.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I would say too, like, to MSPs that are, on the smaller side, and what by I mean, like, in that, 8 to 12 or even below that range, and you're looking for a
Yep.
differentiator to help you level up and win business.
Yep.
It's, if you strategically build this service, right, and dedicate a resource to it, other than the owner, right? Maybe you got to
Yeah.
go out and make a
Yes.
hire and bring somebody in, but then you can actually you can build faster. You're more nimble than bigger MSPs at the end of the day, right? So you can get this done quicker, and that can be a differentiator. And that can be exactly that, like you talked about, going into a larger account who has an MSP, and they're like, well, we want a bigger MSP. And you're like, well, that's great. We have this vCISO strategy service. We know how to work with MSPs because we are an MSP, and maybe you don't offset the incumbent, right? But you're able to come
Yeah.
in and gain revenue and create all sorts of project work and other ways to bring revenue into your business and grow it. And that just becomes, the flywheel concept: better clients,
Yeah.
better people, better revenue.
And just continue to grow.
Yeah.
One of the questions I had, this is completely a little bit off topic, but
Yeah.
I've seen a lot around cyber insurance and how some vCISOs are becoming as that, hey, here's what you need to do just to maintain and be accessible for true cyber insurance. Because I know, especially if you talk to somebody like Will Brooks out there, there's a lot of resources, but they're going to talk about, hey, not everyone's eligible for cyber liability insurance. And you
Yeah.
might only be eligible for the smallest amount if you don't take the steps. What does that look like in terms of a vCISO offering for helping those? Let's say you're a healthcare organization and you have to reach a certain level of cyber insurance because you have one of the highest levels of patient data and sensitive information. What does that look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to do that. One thing I really like that's a good like entry point, other than risk assessments. Like, I still think risk assessment is the best lead off. That's what you can use
Yeah.
to get in there and say, hey, we'll do an insurance readiness assessment. So we'll make
Perfect.
sure that we're going to come in and tell you exactly, there's different organizations in the industry to work with on this, but you come in and do your risk assessment, and then you say, okay, well, to get the right coverage underwritten, here's what you need to do. Or, hey, you're good, but here's some other things we found, right? The other way to get in there is, now that insurance is typically requiring both an incident response plan, but now
Yeah.
tabletops. So that's one
Got
thing
it.
a lot of companies don't have. So like, we work with 𝐔𝐧𝐥𝐿, who's one of the Power Grid partners. I don't know if
Mhm.
you know them over there. They're a cool platform for that. But we've worked with them to create a templated go-to-market approach
Yeah.
for bringing in incident response plan and
Perfect.
a tabletop exercise for a really low monthly. Now, this is like that managed thing. And so we'll like kind of get in there with that and then expand to like, oh, by the way, that our tabletop assessment uncovered all these other areas of risk in your business. Now you need the vCISO services. Now you need, and you've been working with us, you see the strategic benefit, right? So that's a really low cost entry point to start getting in with companies for an insurance outcome.
Got it. I think that's interesting because the cyber insurance has it's changed a lot, especially with all the big ransomware and hacking and attacks that
Mm-hmm.
you've seen over the last 5, 6 years, where it's like it's changed a ton. And I'm sure it's because insurance providers probably got burned and they didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know what they had to do, and they thought, okay, oh, you have your policies, you have these things in place, cool, you're probably okay.
Yeah.
But much like CMMC, that had to change. You need to demonstrate maturity. You need to have the right systems. You need to have the right compliance. It's the same thing with, it's like homeowners insurance or anything else. If you're not meeting the minimum standards of how to be insured, it's not
Mm-hmm.
going to work for you. So I think I had an interest around there because I see it a lot, just curiosity.
Yeah.
Another one of my questions here, one of the last things I like to talk about is around the pricing, because I think so many MSPs price this differently. Some
Yeah.
think it's, $1,000 a month that they need to offer
Mhm.
too. Some people say 10. Where do you
Yeah.
find that sweet spot is in terms of matching the pricing to the value of the offering? And how much
Yeah.
does that, like, what would be the range for a typical MSP selling VC so they
Yeah.
could say, hey, the average contract that we sell is between X and Y?
Yeah, it's a good question. As in all things, it depends on your
Yeah,
target
yeah, of
client, your
course.
target market. But what I will say, like, again, I see a lot of these programs across a lot of different types of target markets. So in general, number one, unchain it from your user cost. It has to be
Yes.
unchained from your user cost.
It has to be
Um, yeah,
value driven
you
pricing.
will, you can never, like, you might have a 12-person SaaS company who's selling to Fortune 100 companies that is willing to pay you 12 grand a month for just risk strategy. And if you're
Yeah.
charging them an extra $50 a seat, like, how much, holy cow, how much money and bandwidth are you losing? So you're completely oversubscribed. So it just doesn't, the service does not work that way. Now, it should be a productized monthly service. Don't trade dollars for hours. You can't scale that.
Right.
We're going back to the MSP break fix model. We all know how that ends up, right? But it's more of a consumption-based model, which I think is like, everyone wants to talk about that right now. But at the end of the day, it's a productized SaaS style model for the vCISO service. Now to what we're actually charging, again, with our price calculators that we provide and what I see when I work both with individual MSPs or when they go through our self-paced program, typically lowest you could probably get away with to keep it profitable is like 2,500, and that's really low. I don't see many that that's more of like a box checking. We'll meet with you quarterly just to say you have a risk program. But so we talk about segmentation. You might have a section of your client base that has like, we don't really care. We just want a box check. And you sell them that and an incident response retainer because you're like, you're going to get breached because you have all this risk, right? So you've showed them that risk. Now we're getting into like the tactical operational side of things. We don't have time for that today. But then on the high end, I see some of our we see higher maturity type of programs with like really highly regulated SaaS or SEC or other industries like that, selling 12, 15K a month retainers, right? For vCISO. But typically the large, like that's a bell curve, right? So you see in the center of the bell curve, we see like 5K to 8K a month for vCISO services. And I think for what clients want and all the things they need, I talked about incident response planning and those other things, it's hard to be profitable under 5,000 a month with that. So that's what I'm seeing.
I think gross margins, what is typically the gross margin that you're trying to target, or is a good gross margin to target with that type of service?
We want to see 60% at least gross margins. That's what our calculator has it. And then I also like to see a 50% gross margin on any software you're selling with it too, because you're going to have some costs with that as well. So
and I think
some extra padding,
Yeah, you want the padding so that way you don't feel constrained. You're not time and dollars, but if you have to spend a few extra hours or an extra day a month on occasion or there, I know if it's a recurring thing, then it's, hey, we're doing more, we need to scope up. But we see the same thing on our side of the accounting world. When it comes to fractional CFO, we can meet with you quarterly. We're going to give you kind of a snapshot where you are. But if you really want that proactive management, knowing your finances, knowing your profitability, you have a plan of revenue, a budget and forecast, and need someone to make sure you're getting there and making recommendations. Yeah, you're probably looking at 4 or 5 at a minimum. And that's just so we can have enough resource. So you're not feeling, hey, I'm just getting a report and I'm a meeting once a month. No, you're getting a plan, you're getting the strategy, you're getting the response and all of that through there. And it's increasing the valuation. I think the biggest thing is tying any service, especially value-based pricing, back to the ROI. And ROI could be a little bit of, you don't want to misconstrue it, be like, hey, if you lose your business, you're not going to have any revenue. That's why you should work with us. But it should be a true, hey, here's the investment you're making into this per year based on your revenue. And here's why this is important, because if you didn't make this investment, here's the potential downsides of lost revenue or lost efficiency. Or I think the other nondescript, everybody knows you might lose money, you might lose clients, you might lose employees, you might lose service lines, you might not be able to support something, you might not be able to grow. And I think it's being able to see, once again, doing your research on the challenges your ideal client is facing will better position you to answer and solve those challenges. Crazy, right? It's not, it's the difference between saying, I'm a general personal trainer. No, I'm a personal trainer I'm a strength coach that works with professional football players and those in college who are looking to make that jump. Who is going to win more of their ideal client? Probably the one with the hyper specificity. Jesse, we're about towards the end here. It's been a great conversation. As always on Stride Live, I'd like to say too long didn't watch for the MSP owners around growing revenue through vCISO. What's the 1-minute takeaway they can use today in their business?
Okay. 1-minute takeaway is, number one, you need to get specific about who you're going to serve with the service. And you have to start talking to those people, and you cast too wide of a net, you're going to end up with no fish in it. Okay. Second is, you need somebody accountable to move the program forward. This isn't kind of like, we'll figure it out as we go down the tracks. We need someone that's going to own it, and we need to enable them. It's not like we just take somebody and say, okay, this is your job now and everything else. We need to have a plan to migrate them off their old duties, backfill their old duties, and actually enable them to build this program with marketing, sales, and all the other go-to-market support that goes with it, right? So that's not insignificant. We need to make that commitment though. And then the last thing is, have a plan. Okay. So I will shamelessly say, we do that at the Power Grid. Come see us if you want to get that plan for the go-to-market, for the service delivery, for the community of all the other operators to help build this for yourself. And so that's my 1-minute takeaway.
I appreciate that, Jesse. And yeah, if you're looking at VC, so I see him all over the space. I see him at LinkedIn. I meet at conferences. I've yet to meet somebody who does it better. So head to powerpsa.com, work with Jesse. And I promise if you're looking to grow your MSP in the VC, so you're not going to regret it. Make that investment, build the maturity in your business, and really just see him as a better advisor for your clients. Jesse, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. We'll have to have you on again. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of response on this one after. So thank
Yeah,
you.
man. Always good chatting with you, dude. You know, I love these conversations. So whether they're had in a hallway at a conference or in front of LinkedIn here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk soon, man.
All righty. That was great.